Good evening. You're very welcome to this edition of Ireland's Generation X series that focuses on Irish writers born between 1965 and 1985. We're delighted, as always, to present the series in partnership with the Keough-Naughton Institute for Irish Studies at the University of Notre Dame. My name is Simon O'Connor. I'm the director here at MoLI, the Museum of Literature Ireland, located on Dublin St Stephen's Green, and I'm delighted to let you know that we will be back open on Friday, the 14th of May. We're thrilled to be reopening with a brand new exhibition about picture book author Chris Houghton, and we can't wait to see you in our exhibitions and gardens again. And all of us here at the museum are, of course, looking forward to having lovely coffees from the Commons Cafe, who will also reopen for takeaway on the same day. This evening, we're joined once again by Professor Barry McCrea, a novelist and a scholar of comparative literature, who will be in conversation with Caitriona Lally, author of the celebrated novel Eggshells and recipient of the Rooney Prize for Irish Literature in 2018. I'm told that Caitriona's second novel will be published by New Island this year, so that's one to look forward to. And before I go, I'd like to let you know about another event this week. Tomorrow, Thursday, I'll be hosting my monthly Directors Book Club at 5 p.m, which is free for MoLI members. And this week we're reading a classic, Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I'm delighted that Nicholas Daly, Professor of Modern English and American Literature in UCD, will be joining me for the event. Finally, if you do enjoy tonight's programme, I'd encourage you to buy MoLI membership for yourself or a friend. It really is the best way to support the museum and its programming. You can save 25% on membership with the discount Eggshells, all in capitals, this evening. And that's valid today, only today. So visit moli.ie/membership to find out more. And we'll put that information into the chat as well this evening. With that, I hope you enjoy the evening. Looking forward to seeing you all soon in the museum. And I'll hand you over to Professor Barry McCrea and Caitriona Lally.
Thank you, Simon. And I'd also like to thank Benedict and Laura from MoLI and my colleague Catherine Wilsden, who cooked up this series with me. Well, you're very welcome, Caitriona. Nice to have you. We were wondering before, when we were putting together the list of writers, if you would qualify, because you are on the very young end of our Gen X. But I think from rereading Eggshells today, I think your cultural references do give you at least an understanding of the Irish Gen X experience. So maybe you could just tell us a bit about where you're from and where you grew up, your childhood, first of all, and then we'll move forward to how you became a writer.
Sure. Okay. Lovely to be here, Barry. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I just scraped in the Generation X. I think there's different criteria, isn't there? Like, I was born in '79, but I think that's sometimes is the cutoff, and then it goes to the 80s, other definitions of it. So I grew up in Comparative in Dublin and had a really boringly happy childhood, which I always thought would disqualify me from being a writer. I felt there weren't enough challenges early on, which are, maybe are more character defining, I think, if you have more challenges. But I grew up in Comparative, and I'd a half Dublin, half Mayo upbringing, I suppose, which I think defined me. I don't know in what way in terms of being a writer, but in terms of defining my identity, like, I would really identify with Mayo. I have two Mayo parents, and Mum and Dad are work teachers. They're retired now, but so we had long school holidays in which we always went to Belmullet, the edge of the world, basically, the beautiful peninsula in Mayo, which you probably know, Barry. You've Mayo parents, I know, as well.
Well, I'm very interested in this this side of things, not just because my parents are from Mayo, and one of them a teacher indeed, but because I think it's a common experience that isn't that documented in a way. The experience of growing up in Dublin with what used to be called culty parents and having a kind of divided identity that way. So I'm curious, because your book is so rooted in not just Dublin, but in mostly in North Dublin. What was your sense of Dublin, or your relationship to it when you were growing up? In what ways were you a Dubliner, or were you not? Or what did Dublin seem like?
Yeah, well, Dublin, so we had, Clontarf was a suburb, obviously. It's a lovely, middle class suburb, but I suppose I grew up feeling very connected to the city as well. Like, we grew up, it's about 4 miles from the city centre. And I know from some of my friends' childhoods, if they grew up in the suburbs, they kind of stuck within that suburb and, you know, shopped in local shopping centres or hung out at local places or drank in local pubs. But we were very much, I'm talking about friends now and siblings, we'd have gone into town a lot on the bus, or if the, you know, I remember bus strikes too, you'd walk into town. It seemed very, I felt part of the city centre, and it was, I suppose, the north side of town. Like you'd meet your friends at Cleary's Clock, that's, you know, under the clock, and you'd hang out there. I remember, like, say, Jervis Centre opening in the mid-90s when I was a teenager. That was a big deal. That kind of, just that you had a shopping centre in town to hang out in. You felt like it was an American mall, even though it was probably pretty far from it. Then school, I suppose, I went to the local school in Comparative, the Holy Faith, and it was an all-girls school. I had a fine time. Like, I wasn't a rebel. I need to say that. I wasn't cool. I feel I should say, because I'm a writer, I feel I should have had a rebellious upbringing, but I just kind of, I was a swot. Like, I just got on with my schoolwork, and, like, you know, I hated maths. I absolutely hated maths. I was terrible at it, but I liked English. I liked languages. I did French and German. I had some brilliant teachers, made great friends, and was really into running. Actually, that was my big thing in secondary school. And we had a running coach, Enda Fitzpatrick, who was an Olympian himself back in his day, and he was a maths teacher in the school, and he happened to he ran the athletics, and I ran cross country and track and field, and really loved it. And that kind of, I suppose, defined my school days. It was, you know, Wednesdays and Fridays were training in the school, and then I did one day in the weekend at home on my own. And that was such a big part of my life for me. Was like, when I was thinking in preparation for this, I was trying to think of my teenage years, and running and going to Belmullet were kind of my big things. So I wasn't thinking along the lines of being a writer then. Like, that hadn't even crossed my mind. When I was in school, I was aiming to do medicine, which is a whole other field. So that's probably why I was a SWAT. I was aiming to get the points to do medicine, and had that down on my CAO form, and then lost confidence at the night before the CAO form was due in. You had the change of mind option. I'm not sure if that's there now, and changed my mind. I put down clinical speech therapy as my first option. So kind of, I had this freak attack and just thought, there's no way I can have the confidence to be a doctor, to be in charge of people's lives. So yeah, like, even though I loved English and loved writing, especially the creative part of English, where you were writing stories from scratch, I loved it, but didn't see it as something that I could do.
And what about Belmullet, do you think, when you think now as a writer, when you think back on what formative experiences you had that I suppose gave you a deepened sense of the world, were the summers in Belmullet important? I mean, the countryside is almost absent in Eggshells, but there's something in the atmosphere of your prose that makes me wonder if something got into your head then in these lovely summers in the countryside beside the sea.
Yeah, like, it's true. Eggshells is a very, very much a Dublin novel, and I think that spoke of its time when I was writing it, and was kind of stuck wandering the same streets in Dublin. But it's hard to define where the sense of identity with Mayo would come out. It's probably in language. Like, it's stuff I wouldn't recognize, a turn of phrase, or, you know, especially if you've two parents from Mayo, you grow up speaking or hearing a dialect that, it's not obviously true blue dub. It's different, but I couldn't define it because I'm too close to it. So
yeah.
And I would love to write, like, I really wanted to write a Mayo novel, but it would require kind of immersion. And at the moment, I have a couple of young kids. It's not the time to do it. But I'd have to write it as a blow-in. Like, I still can't claim a rural upbringing, you know. It's very much a half and half. And in Mayo, to my Mayo cousins, we were the Jackeens, and to Dublin friends, I was a bogger. So you're kind of split between the two things.
Well, there's just something about the way the city is viewed by the protagonist in Eggshells that is both insider and outsider at the same time. I suppose that there is a kind of a wonderment at small things like the clock in Eason's, um, uh, passing interactions with people on the streets, with bus drivers and the like, that makes me I guess one gets the feeling of somebody who's inside and outside the city at the same time. So, but we go back to maybe back to your CV, as it were. So, clinical speech therapy. That was the next. That was the next part of the story. What happened then?
So I did my leaving cert in '97 and did clinical speech therapy then in Trinity. And at the time, Trinity was the only place in the Republic where you could do speech therapy. So I had never actually been to Trinity. Like, it's bizarre. I grew up in Dublin, but I'd never gone in through the gates of Trinity until I went till I went to college in '97. It was like a lot like school. There was, I think it was 26 in our class. 25 were girls and one mature student, the poor fella, who was very out of depth with all the hormones. But it was so like school because you were quite regimented too. It was very 9 to 5 with an hour for lunch, and you had assignments. You were kind of on this treadmill that was so different to when I went back to do English a few years later. It was your time was very structured. The girls were from very similar backgrounds to me. I think there wasn't many people going to fee-paying schools or anything. It was a vocation course, so we were there to learn how to be speech therapists. And I mean, it was brilliant in many ways. We had a fantastic social life. We did all the traffic light balls and the Romeo and Juliet balls. I don't know if you remember them, those kind of the really typical kind of student nights and the £1 a pint kind of promotional nights. I made great friends, had a brilliant time, but somewhere in second year when we started all the clinical placements, it hit me that you can't cure things in the space of a couple of weeks, which sounds ridiculously naive, but I had misunderstood the therapy part of speech therapy and thought I could go in and fix people. And I got frustrated. There was so much paperwork you had to do. You had to write plans for each session you did with a child, and then you'd only spend half an hour, say, with the child. Then you had to write up after it what you did, all these notes. And I found it was just too much for me. And for the tiny, tiny incremental changes you would make in a patient's life and the public system, there was such a shortage of speech therapists. And I know the irony is I dropped out then, like making it even more of a shortage of speech therapists in the country. But I couldn't give 100%. And it's the kind of a job you need to be all in. So I finished second year, did my J1 in New York, spent a summer working in New York as a home health, and then came back, started third year, I think a couple of weeks in, and dropped out. And then took that year out to work because at that time we'd free education, like genuine free education, not the kind of free education they're talking about now, but where it was a 300 quid was your registration fee. So because I dropped out, if I was going to go back, I was going to have to pay for 2 years. So I worked for a year as a care assistant in a nursing home. And then went back to study English in 2000, I think it was. And that was a whole other world. I was not prepared for that. I was 21 now at this stage. And like, I loved English. I want to say that. It was a huge privilege to basically read books and write about them for 4 years. But the students were dauntingly wealthy, confident people. Now, not all of them, but there was a core contingent of phenomenally wealthy people, as I saw it. Just, a lot of students didn't have to work in the summer. Their parents paid for their apartments in Dublin and they read ahead or whatever they did. And that was a culture shock. It was fascinating to see. So I was 21 going in and had left school, 3 years before. And even the kind of fee-paying Dublin school thing was a world apart to me that I didn't know of. And I went in, and I remember the first day, people come up to you and ask, what school did you go to? I was thinking, hang on, we're adults. Why are you asking about school? But it was to place you. And I was really baffled by it. And people would openly, fellas and girls would openly walk away when I said, oh, just the local school, you wouldn't know it. And people seemed to be, they were placing people or identifying them. And I remember one lad, who went to a Fee-Paying school explaining to me, well, the Mandanville girls are this, and the high school boys are that, and the Gonzaga boys, or whatever it was. It was this other language that seemed so parochial too, to be still banging on about school as adults. And then there were the British really posh students, which I know Paul Murray has talked about, which that was another level of, well, you know, Eton and these schools I had actually heard of. They were so so culturally important in Britain.
So then, after you finished the degree in English, you went off globetrotting. Is that?
Yeah. So I finished English and was always wanted to go traveling after. Went to Japan, taught English there for a year, and then traveled around Asia for almost another year. Came back to Dublin in 2006. The height of the Celtic Tiger.
Height of it, yeah.
Yeah, and that was, yeah, again, another land. I hadn't noticed the Celtic Tiger when I was in college because, you know, you don't have money then. But I remember coming back and friends now were working and just had that bit more cash and thinking, wow, like, well, Irish people seem to move so fast. That really stuck with me. Just, I suppose, coming dossed around Asia for a year at this very slow pace. Irish people were fast moving. There was fast talking. They were clutching coffee cups. That had happened in my absence.
That's my memory too, Caitriona. Yeah, in those years I was living in a small American college town, and when I came back, that was my feeling too. People racing around and coffee cups everywhere.
Yeah. And until then, like, coffee for me was something you sat down and met someone for, and you had a treat of a coffee. And now people were racing to work holding these takeaway coffee cups. So it becomes normal very quickly. But.
And what were you thinking in your own mind then about what you wanted to do with yourself when you came back?
I hadn't a clue. I hadn't thought this through at all. I was just coming back. I went back to live at home with my family, which was great. I wasn't paying rent or anything, which was so you could kind of take your time then. And it seems so old-fashioned now, but I remember the Irish Independent, the actual paper copy had jobs, and I happened across a job for abstract writer in this publishing company, H.W. Wilson, and applied for that, did a writing test and got the job. And I worked there for the next 4.5 years. So that was reading magazine articles and writing summaries of them. And it was heaven. Like, it was, you know, I mean, it was like being back in English as well. You were reading things like Aviation Week of Space Technology, or Business Week, or Oprah magazine, or, you know, New Yorker Review of Books, this massive range of magazines. So it was good training for reading quickly and writing quickly, because we had to do 23 abstracts a day. And then a couple of years later, when the recession hit, they started layoffs. They laid off most of our department, and the ones left had to then double our output literally overnight to 46 abstracts a day, which was you had 10 minutes to read an article and write a summary of it. So great training, but yeah.
Well, I was going to say your sentences are very short and very clear. So I wonder if
that could be it. Yeah.
And then becoming a writer was literally an accident. You were telling me.
Yeah, actually. So while I was working as an abstract writer, I was running all the time, and I had kind of up to running marathons and was really enjoying the marathon running, but wanted a new challenge and started training for an ultra marathon. There's a Comrade ultra marathon in South Africa. It's 56 miles, and that was my goal. And I had to do a marathon to qualify for that. Did a marathon in Valencia with my brother and banjaxed my knee, tore the meniscus in it, got surgery, and it didn't work out. Anyway, basically there was running had ended for me, and that was actually devastating. And there was a real grief after that, because it was such a passion for me. It was took up a lot of my life. And so I kind of went into a sulk for a while, as you do, and then thought, okay, what else can I do? I need to get passionate about something else, and did a writing course. And that was an evening creative writing course after work with Greg Baxter, an American writer. And that was brilliant for me. It forced me to just take criticism, to submit a short story. I'd never written a short story before, to actually write something, submit it for feedback, not be precious about the criticism. It was a brilliant course. It was over a year with 3 kind of 10-week stints, and I learned a lot from that. So that got me into the thoughts of writing. Again, I hadn't thought about, like, I didn't think myself I could publish, if that makes sense. I thought I'll do this thing as another hobby for me. And then 2011, my company shut down, got laid off. And this is obviously a recession. There's not many jobs available. And I had just finished my writing course, and I thought, okay, I'll try and submit short stories, try and submit essays to journals or competitions, try and do that. I was having no luck, was job hunting with no joy either, and thought, feck it, I need something to delay rejection. Inevitable, I felt, rejection. I thought, I'll write a novel. And just started wandering around the streets of Dublin back in 2011, 2012, and kind of noting things in notebook, conversations with bus drivers or graffiti I noticed. And I think at the start I thought that this was going to be an essay. I wanted to talk about something to do with Dublin, like street signs with letters missing, things I was observing, and then I couldn't find an angle, and I felt the facts weren't interesting enough. So I started trying to imagine, why are the letters missing in the street signs? And just, the voice of Vivian then came from that, this kind of misfit, not belonging, just wandering around on her own.
She's a protagonist unlike any other, and so she's a very, not just that she's very unusual, but she's a very particular flavor of unusual that the reader feels very viscerally, because we're plunged right into her worldview. And in fact, we have to really work hard to try and construct what the real world is outside, what's really going on, because we're so inside. I'm very curious to know where she came from. And I was, as you were talking earlier, I was thinking of a few things. One was that your whatever led you to study speech and language therapy made me think that you have an interest in people whose relationship to language and social interactions, or kind of the social world in general, is unusual in some way, or considered to be partial or different. I wonder, was that part of it, or your own experience? That you mentioned this to me before when we chatted off air about of being unemployed and negative equity and all that. So, anything you can think of about where this extraordinary character came from?
Yeah, well, I hadn't thought at all about the speech therapy angle. I suppose I went into speech therapy thinking it was kind of partially medical, which I love. Like I love hospitals. I have a weird graw for hospitals. I don't know where that comes from. And linguistics as well, like, would interest me, the building blocks of language or dialect. So yeah, maybe an obsession with language would feed into Vivian. Yeah, definitely the not belonging in a recession, or feeling kind of, feeling isolated, because even though it was a recession, like, the vast majority of my friends had kept their jobs and were going, to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and doing their thing. And I just remember the first morning after being laid off, waking up and going, oh God, what next? Like, and at this point, we had bought a house again, 2007, a month off the peak housing prices. And then everything had crashed, negative equity, and you've no job. And just this sense of, oh God, and really feeling I didn't fit in, or, especially the people I worked with in Wilson's, I really got on with. They were great friends. And then suddenly to not have this structured environment, and like that would come later, even on maternity leaves, having had kids, that this kind of, wow, you have to build yourself up again and make yourself part of something. I think that was where the not belonging came from. And just, I took that to extreme. Like, I wasn't feeling exactly what Vivian was feeling, obviously, but just I kind of went with that, trying to see the world differently. And then I was looking at Dublin a little bit negatively too at the time, and I wanted to make it a bit more magical for myself.
But she has a kind of wonderment about the city around her, and she's somebody who is kind of structurally disconnected from society, from the world, but who then builds a whole series of other connections. Like she wants to drop lemons on Lemon Street, or she wants to eat and be surrounded by only things that are blue, or she kind of builds up systems of her own. So there's a figure of the artist in there somewhere too.
And she wrote notes, random bizarre notes in books, and put them into charity shops, and that's something I used to do, just bizarrely, even before Vivian. Yeah. Just I love the idea of never knowing who would get this book and read it and go, what the hell? Like, so yeah.
So you really did that. That's a great scene. and she puts fivers in the pockets as well.
I did that actually. I went into Guineas and the kind of cardigans that you felt older women would buy. I put fivers in the pockets there. So I hope somebody found it and kept it and didn't hand it back.
So this capacity you have of seeing the world from, I suppose, the outside or the wings, that's also in something that comes up in your day job, the day job you do now. So you are doubly a Trinity person from your studies, but in fact you're triply a Trinity person because you work there now.
Yeah, so I worked there as a cleaner. I started that in 2015. After I was laid off, I did a few short-term kind of projects and jobs, but then 2015, I had worked as a cleaner in Trinity in the summers when I was studying there, and I stayed friends with some of the women. And during the recession, Trinity weren't hiring in housekeeping, and then some of the cleaners told me, they're hiring again. I went back in, just a few months before my novel came out, and I've been there since. So that's 6 years now, and I really love it. Like it works so well with the writing job. It's early mornings. I'm finished by 9:30. It just works. Like it's not. I wouldn't do it obviously if I won the lotto, but it's physical work which helps me. Like I don't want another writing job, and I don't want. Like a lot of writers would do the hustle of looking for, doing reviews and journalism. And I admire them hugely because that's work to me, trying to find work or create work, or, you don't have it every week, you don't know what's coming in, but I know I get my weekly wage and it's a good basis. I can earn a bit of money on top with the writing, but, my mortgage and bills are paid basically by the cleaning job. So that's, yeah.
But I mean, you've really seen all sides of Trinity. So you saw the science end with all the girls and the one fella in speech and language therapy. Then you saw English with the Hooray Henrys from Eton. And what do you see now that you didn't see before that other people don't see? What is there? Because I mean, your book is so much about looking in. What's going on in the wings of reality, I suppose, behind the backstage in a way. And what do you see, not just about Trinity, I mean, but about the world? Is there anything you see in your job cleaning that?
Well, I suppose literally, like you would see things that aren't open, in the normal hours when students are there. So, say if you're cleaning, do you know the long room where the Book of Kells is, the library and the Book of Kells? Like those doors aren't open. So if you go there, you're going into the arts block. I don't know if you know it, Barry, the tunnels. You're going down into these tunnels and up this clanky old lift. And then suddenly you're in this dark, long room with these marble busts looking at you. Like that's an amazing thing. If you're the only person in that building, it's really special. Like some of the cleaners I know don't want to work there because they're completely spooked, but I loved it. Yeah. And when I started, I was 9 months working as a spare, which is covering for other cleaners who are sick or on holidays, and you got to see so much of the place. And these kind of secret doors or cubbies where cleaners keep their accoutrements, like those things you don't notice as a student. And I suppose the people too, like if you're a cleaner, the people who you're dealing with are the maintenance guys, security guards, the attendants. These are people you mightn't necessarily notice as a student. I suppose too, what I find very interesting is seeing a double side to people. That some people who are in Trinity might come across as very liberal, I suppose, and tolerant, and in theory they probably are, but they mightn't always be nice to the actual cleaner. That has been interesting, and there's a real kind of, I suppose, a whisper network among the cleaners. There's a real kind of camaraderie where if you're starting in a new place, the other cleaners will tell you, this guy's an awful idiot, or be careful of her, or whatever it is. And sometimes you might look at the name on a professor's door and you think, wow, I've heard of them, but they're not the nicest to the cleaner. Now, I will add a disclaimer though. Most are lovely.
I'm sure they are, and I won't ask you any names. But is it a surprise who behaves in a decent way to the cleaning staff and who doesn't?
Sometimes it is. I will say most are lovely. And what I love about coming in early, if you've lecturers coming in early themselves, you build up a great relationship with them, and you get to know about each other's families. It's a proper colleague kind of arrangement. And the students too, like like with everything, there's good and bad students. There's students who come in very early in the morning because I think of high Dublin rents, that they are commuting from, Mullingar and Tullamore. They're coming in on early commuter buses and they're sitting around and they're doing their kind of whatever assignments before they go into class. That's a tough gig. Like,
yes, yeah.
Back when we were in college, rent was actually affordable. And so you see good and bad. Like I do remember one incident when I was heavily pregnant with my second child and I was cleaning a lecture room, and not all students are lovely, like everyone, but the lecture theatre has steps, and I was kind of cleaning desks coming down and toppled down a couple of steps, and I was fine. But I got up and kind of looked over to the two lads who were talking, assuming they'd maybe ask how I was, and they kind of looked at me, and the look they gave me was, "Oh, the health is intruding on our conversation." Like, they just kind of stared at me. And I remember saying kind of sarcastically, "Don't worry, lads, I'm all right." And they just stared at me and went back to their conversation. It was utterly bizarre. Now, that's not representative, but it just, wow. Like, but that fascinates me. It didn't actually upset me. It fascinates me how the machinations in your head you have to do to treat another human like they're just something beneath you. I find fascinating.
But you're great to laugh at it. I think not
I mightn't have been laughing at the time, yeah.
But I see that in Eggshells as well. That we are watching the different way in which people respond to Vivian in the world, and there are two types of people. People who are able to make the imaginative leap into somebody who's not in their world, or who's an inconvenience to them, and those who aren't, I suppose. But it is a book that people really respond to. I mean, it's hard not to respond to it. It just goes so deeply into your head when you read it. But you also had, especially when you won not just the Rooney Prize, but what's the other name of the other prize?
The Lannan Fellowship.
That's right, the Lannan Fellowship. You also had response from cleaners who were happy about your success. Do you want to tell us?
Yeah. So, firstly, when I won the Rooney, it was amazing to be able to tell the cleaners I worked with and to invite them to there was a night in the Provost House in Trinity, which I had cleaned before, and some of the women who clean his house were there as well. And that was lovely to have, they came and were waited on and got served food and drink when they were usually cleaning it. There was amazing support from my colleagues. And I remember one woman just saying, "One of us won a prize." And she was really, I felt like, wow, I'm kind of accepted into this group. It was amazing. The Lannan was, I think, I felt a bit uncomfortable in some ways when I won the Rooney, actually, that it went further afield, like the media publicity, because I'm a cleaner. And I felt I had to explain that I was very lucky that I had opportunities. I'd gotten to go to college, that this was a choice, that I was making the job as part of my life. And the Washington Post took it up and ran with it. And some people got the impression that I was a single parent and working as a cleaner. And that's not true. I have an amazing partner who is, more than does his fair share. And I was getting emails from cleaners in Mexico who were also single mothers, who thought I was also a single mother. And I felt bad. I felt like I had to, I thanked them, and I emailed back and thanked them for their good wishes. But I felt like these women had so few opportunities compared to what I had. And, it just felt a bit, I don't know, I felt misrepresented, or I had gotten the wrong end of the stick out there.
I mean, you're very, scrupulous to think about that, but it is, I'm sure it's a real gift that you gave them as well to see, because the truth is you are doing the cleaning. You had all these opportunities and things, but you are mopping and scrubbing like they are in the mornings, and then. So actually, how does that work? So you what time do you hang up your rubber gloves? And
at 9:30.
9:30, and then you go home and open.
So pre-COVID, I would have gone to the National Library to write, or gone to a cafe to write. But then it's home. At the moment, the Lannan Fellowship, there was money from that, and that allowed me to take some unpaid leave. So I'm on unpaid leave at the moment, which is amazing. And I'm just to try and get this final edit of the second novel done. But 9:30 I finish, which is great. Like I'm watching people going to work, and I'm finished my day. Like the getting up early is hard. Like I'm not a morning person naturally, so it's a fight every morning, but it's worth it.
So then your writing hours are between kind of 9:30 and lunchtime. That's
Yeah. Now I've my two kids are in creche, and that buys me writing time too, which is great. So then I pick them up in the early evening, and then it's mammy time until bedtime.
I mean, that's a very full day. That's
Yeah.
a varied one.
The variety for me really works. I love having a physical job and then sitting, because if you're moving around a lot, you look forward to actually sitting down, as opposed to if I was doing another writing job and then writing. I think that's really tough to keep motivated.
I mean, there is a lot, and then we'll move to your new book now. But there is quite a lot of descriptions of forms of domestic work in Eggshells too. There's one, the description of hoovering. I know you told me that you started the cleaning after, but it's about that you said bashing the furniture. I think it was a very vivid depiction of hoovering. And
oh wow, I hadn't realized that.
There's a few of them, yeah. I mean, obviously the kind of things, boiling eggshells and all what she does is strange forms of housework, but there's an attentiveness to it.
Yeah, and in my second book, actually, I have two characters, and my one character was working as a security guard, and then I changed that to have him working as a cleaner, because I wanted him kind of physically engaged with something, as opposed to just watching, which is what you do if you're security. Yeah.
So what can you tell us about the new book?
The new book took me 7 years, so it's long overdue, and it's about two characters. So Eggshells was this intensity of one character inside her head. The second book is two characters, a brother and a sister. The sister is visiting the brother in Hamburg. He has moved over there. He's working as a cleaner in this model railway exhibition, the Miniature Wonderland. I don't know if you know it or if anyone knows it. I happened to visit a friend in Hamburg a few years back and loved it. Just visited this model railway exhibition, and it's like 8 miles of track. There's 200,000 little mini figurines. It's this whole magical little exhibition. And I got a bit obsessed and went back 3 times, which took a load of notes and set my novel there.
You might read a bit if you have something ready for us. And just everybody, I meant to say at the beginning, if you have a question for Caitriona, I know some of you, they're coming in already, so some of you know, but there's a chat function on the sidebar, so you can type your questions in there, and after the reading, we'll have a Q&A.
Great.
So go for it.
Okay. So this bit is from the perspective of Gert, the sister, and she's in a cafe. She's trying to kill time. She's left on her own in Hamburg, and she's reading magazines. I opened one of the magazines that I bought for the trip. The only time I buy magazines, really. Pages of rubbish that they are, telling me that buying this must-have or wearing that signature piece, holding your go-to handbag or wearing your statement skirt would make you stand out from the crowd. But if we all wore what they told us to wear, we'd all look the same. We can't all stand out from the crowd, so we'd all be standing back into the crowd. I skipped the pages to the comparisons between expensive designer versions of clothes to cheaper versions for ordinary women. Problem is, on my wage, even the cheaper versions are out of my budget. Their skinted is my minted, and I don't know where that leaves me. I once calculated the average cost of the 9 skirts the style pages of a Saturday newspaper supplement showed, €327. That's what the style writers thought the average woman could spend on a skirt. And the galling thing was, this wasn't even one of the fancier magazines. I flicked to an interview with a female celebrity who was all bubbles and froth, a one-woman hen party, the kind of person I avoid in real life, but in print her punctuation was cheering. She seemed to have been born with her finger on the exclamation mark key, which kept me nicely in the shallows. She was talking about her life choices. I don't know why so many celebrities bang on about their life choices, as if where we end up is under our control, as if it all just works out after picking a certain path from a checklist as a teenager. In my experience, you choose a direction, then you spend the rest of your life scraping the worst of the shite off your decisions. I turned to the problem page near the back. A woman was asking for advice on how to make love to her husband so that he wouldn't be tempted to stray. The answer was a load of sweet, sick muck about commitment and feeling, with lots of eye-gazing. If I was the agony aunt, I'd say, for starters, if you're making love, you're not doing it right. Agony aunts in advice columns seem to give advice based on hypothetically perfect lives. They advise the maritally problemed to leave their imperfect unions and live your best life. They say that it's best for both parties in the relationship and for any children involved if the unhappy person leaves a problematic situation and finds first themselves and then somebody else. What utter guff. How many marriages would survive this advice? What about the reality that all relationships go through tough times and maybe sticking at it might be worth it? I moved on to the next magazine. There were endless style tips to take you from desk to dinner or from office to bar. What guff. It sticks in my gullet, this assumption that every woman works in an office. Where are the outfits to take you from nursing home to local pub, from dole queue to house party, from bar to busman's holiday? I feel unspoken to in these magazines, and the annual Christmas party dress feature disowns me. It assumes I have glamorous places to go to socialise with similarly sequined and velveted women. I turned to an interview with a celebrity about how she spends her weekends. How is it that in all these day in a life columns, the interviewees seem to spend their Saturday and Sunday mornings practicing yoga or Tai Chi before strolling around a farmer's market and then having a leisurely lunch and strolling around an art gallery? How much fucking strolling can you do in one day? Why aren't they tearing around Tesco or racing to get their kids to football matches on time? How is it that these celebrities are so busy having leisurely lunches with friends on restaurant terraces, they don't end up horsing Big Macs and McDonald's, hoping they won't be spotted coming out under the golden arches by the hipster vegan mom squad? And as for their evenings, it seems every celebrity loves nothing better than to cook a simple meal, prepared from their farmer's market hall, of course, locally sourced, ethically produced, fair trade, low plastic, zero carbon emission, and share it with friends. If they're all so busy hosting all the time, who actually attends their dinners? The world needs guests as much as hosts. There's something so unbearably smug about their lives that I can't help wondering what mass-produced realities lie under the curated perfection. That's it.
That's fantastic. It's often hilarious, which Eggshells often is too. And I can hear both similarities and differences in the tone. That there's the kind of this eye that strips reality back down to its fundamentals and questions them. But there's something slightly different in the tone too. I wonder what's
yeah. This character, she's much more knowing than Vivian. Like she's more socially aware. She's angry. Like she is angry about the reality, but she's more kind of carnal or earthy as well. Like she curses. Vivian didn't curse. This woman talks about sex. Vivian is utterly disengaged from her body. So I think that's why this was much more fun to write as a contrast to Vivian, to someone really aware of the body.
We've loads of questions, so I'll start going through them. So one that I got earlier, and I actually crossed my mind as well, is in Eggshells. This setup of a person wandering around the city. Is there a touch of Joyce's Ulysses behind it? And I did think she also goes to a graveyard, she goes to a beach, she goes to the library, the museum. She does hit a lot of the points in Ulysses. Was that in the back of your mind?
No, it wasn't deliberate. So I hadn't read Ulysses at this point. Once people started asking me about it in interviews, I went and finally got around to reading it. But I avoided Ulysses in college deliberately. I was too daunted by it. I think it just happens that, like, I knew Ulysses existed, obviously, and there was a Joyce and Bloom were wandering around, but I think it's just that I live in North Dublin, near where Leopold Bloom was. I think so. We are wandering the same areas. So that part was coincidence. And then I don't drive, so I live a city at walking pace. I'm getting buses or Lewis's and I'm walking. So that's just how I would read a city.
You're right, a walker city. That's like myself. That's now we have Where's it gone? Oh yeah, so Catherine Wilsden, my colleague, asks, and I was interested in this too. Can you talk about your inspiration for the magical elements of Eggshells, e.g. the thresholds between worlds? That's true. There's a lot of that of Irish mythology and pishrogues and that in it.
Yeah, I liked the thin places. Really, I really like the idea of, like, and I love the bog bodies in the museum, and they feature in the book that these were found in the thin places, these threshold between kingdoms, and that's where the magic occurs. That's where these other world can open up on is it Midsummer's Eve or May Day or whatever it is. I love that idea of the magic within the reality, and it's not like I believe in all this stuff, but I kind of wanted to transplant that. It was mostly rural, these ideas of thin places and all the pishrogues and the fairy tales and the folk tales. I want to transplant that onto Dublin as it is. Like the swans and the canal, she thinks are the children of Lir, but the children of Lir are much more rural. I just like that, trying to contrast this kind of gritty reality of where she does live and have this magical element. It was the idea of the contrast fascinated me, and I wanted myself to see Dublin in a more positive way. I wanted to walk around, and instead of seeing a place that was not giving me a job, I wanted to see this kind of magical place and look at, this door could lead somewhere, and to try and think about things in a different way.
And the children of Lir, they spent some time not far from Balmullet.
Exactly, yeah, Eris, yeah.
So Shinjini asks, you mentioned at the end of Eggshells, oh yes, that's in the interview at the back that I read, that your second novel is difficult. Was it difficult to write, difficult to read, both, or something else?
Very difficult to write. And when I wrote in the interview at the back of that book, that was long before I got really stuck in it. So I just got lost somewhere in the middle of it. When I was writing Eggshells, nobody knew, apart from my partner, nobody knew I was writing a novel or trying to write a novel. And there was a lovely freedom in that I could just follow it and go where it led me. And if it didn't work out, it didn't matter. And I had no idea how to write a novel. Now, like, I'm a bit more jaded or cynical or something. And I got lost so many times. It's not like I didn't spend 7 years sitting down and opening the laptop every day and writing it. I would get stuck for a few months and not write. And then, that feeling probably, Barry, that where you're dreading going back to your laptop, you're dreading opening the file again. And like, I had a couple of distractions. I had kids, I had appendicitis or broken hand. I had all these like minor things that happened that distracted me. But long before the kids came, I had got stuck in it. And I don't know, like, Eggshells to me was magical and it was exciting. I don't really know what happened along the way, but it was difficult to write. I hope it's not difficult to read, and it's being edited thoroughly at the moment, so it should make it more readable.
So Mary is wondering when it's going to be out.
In August with New Ireland, yeah.
Margaret Keller says, it's a comment. She thought your blog on essential workers and the pandemic was one of the most evocative pieces of epidemic writing. So I didn't see that.
That's nice. I was asked to do it for the Long Room Hub in Trinity, and to write about the first lockdown last year when we were working. Cleaners were put working kind of 3 days a week, 3 longer days, so that we didn't mix much with each other. And so I clean in the museum building in Trinity, which you might know is the lovely old building. And I'd be on my own in there for hours. So I was just writing about that and how, you saw all these time changes. The clocks in offices that weren't used were still set to, it was set to winter time. They never changed to summertime. Now they're back to, then suddenly for half the year, it was the clocks were at the right time and there was nobody in to reset them. Just you're cleaning things when there was nobody around. That's what Margaret's talking about.
So we have a question from Etna who asks if it was difficult to get published. This is Eggshells.
Eggshells, I entered the Irish Writers Centre Novel Fair back in 2014 and won a place at that. And so that's how I got my publishing deal. The prize for that is that they picked 12 writers to sit and do kind of speed dating with agents and publishers. And I got an agent out of a publisher directly from that. So I was lucky. That made it a lot quicker than submitting yourself and waiting for publishers to get back to you. So I would really recommend the Irish Writers Centre Novel Fair. It's a brilliant opportunity.
And a question from Enda. I think Eggshells is so visual, it would make a fantastic film. Is there a screenplay? It's true that color is so important in the book. I see what he means.
Okay. Yeah, we got funding from Screen Ireland to work on a screenplay, so I'm doing that at the moment too. Which is, it's fascinating. It's a whole other experience, and I'm glad Enda said that was visual, because I don't see myself as a visual person. So I'm struggling a little bit with writing the screenplay and thinking cinematically, because I don't have that knowledge or expertise of cinema, and I'm desperately trying to kind of play catch up and watch a lot of films to see how it's done. So yeah, it's a steep learning curve at the moment, but it's very exciting. So I meant to say too, it doesn't mean this is going to be made. We're still at very early developmental stages.
So how do you go about working on that? I mean, are you physically writing the screenplay now?
Yeah, working with producers. There's an Irish and American, two producers are working with me. And then when last lockdown actually was tough, because I was working as a cleaner. The kids were home from creche, so I was trying to mind them during the days, and then write this screenplay at night. We had to submit the first act of a screenplay to Screen Ireland last April, at the end of April, and then I was chosen, which was very lucky. Got funding for that, and working with a screen editor with Screen Ireland. So she's kind of giving me feedback, like, because I haven't a clue what I'm doing. So we haven't even got to dialogue stage yet. We're still on the outline. Like, these things take so much time, and it's collaborative, which is a whole new thing for me to be. I'm used to sitting in a room on my own, doing whatever comes into my head, and now it's working over and back with people, which is really interesting, and all through Zoom.
That's very exciting. I'm delighted to hear that's happening, because I agree. There's something about the way, not just colors, but actually sounds as well, working it, that you could really recreate her world in a way that would be immersive for the viewer.
Okay, brilliant. And I have to peel back her bonkersness a bit. Like, she's a little bit too out there for for film, I think. So we have to work on tempering her reactions a bit.
So Gary is throwing a kind of a curved ball at you here. If you could host a dinner with 3 or 4 of your favorite writers, living or dead, who would they be and why? Any favorite writer that you wouldn't invite?
Oh, yeah, I like Joyce a lot, but I wouldn't invite him. There's an arrogance to that man that I can't hold with. Let's see, who would I invite? Oh, this is always a tough question, isn't it? It's like, what are you reading now when you're trying to remember? Someone like Dorothy Parker would be amazing, because she's so cutting. It's that kind of witty, you want witty asides. Oscar Wilde, for that same reason. They could banter amongst themselves. Then somebody to get really drunk would be fun to who's the drinkers, Barry? Name.
Well, some of the ones you've already mentioned.
Yeah, that's true. Austen would be a good one, actually, wouldn't she? She's an observer of character. That's who you'd want. Let's see, Toni Morrison. I really love her work, but I don't know much about her as a person, so who knows what she'd be like. But we'd throw her into the mix.
Yeah, because you would be afraid of being disappointed by the ones you like so much. Although I have a feeling Toni Morrison would have been good company. So there's one more question, which is asking you if the new book explores similar themes to Eggshells. In what ways do you think of it as a completely new second album with a different perspective? And in what ways is there continuity, do you think?
I suppose the continuity is in the city again. So it's Hamburg, but there's still a lot of walking around a city and getting to know it that way. I think there's similarities in outsider characters as well. Like, both the bit I read there from Gert, she's the kind of more accepted in society character, but she still feels not part of it to some extent, and is trying to call out bullshit, basically. Roy is her brother, and he's very much an outsider character. He's a bit of a misfit, and he was kind of banished to Hamburg for slightly dodgy reasons. So yeah, the outsider thing would be there hugely. I suppose the difference is for me that the dual perspective, and that was more fun to write. To kind of, I do first person narrator for Gert to get inside her head, but with Roy, I'm doing third person, he this, he that, because I wanted a bit of distance from his thinking. We're never fully sure what's in his mind. So that was interesting for me to try and get inside each of their heads and then pull Roy back a bit to make him a bit more obscure.
I'm just, because you mentioned Hamburg, I'm wondering myself, you said you did French and German in school, like a lot of us did. And a question that came up right at the beginning, I think, when I talked to Belinda, was the role of Germany as not an imaginative place, but as a kind of alternative place for Generation X Irish people. Does Germany play just even as an idea a role for you?
No, I have to say no to that. I think for me the Germany link was, well, I have a few friends who live in Frankfurt or Hamburg or Berlin, but it was the language that really appealed to me. So like I wasn't amazing at German. I found German the grammar structure quite difficult, but I love those compound nouns, the building blocks where you're piecing together all these nouns, that they fascinated me. And I wanted, so my male character kind of tinkers with them a bit in his head. And then he's obsessed with the idea that if he speaks this right language, that he'll fit into some country, and that if he gets the right collection of nouns together and keeps coming up with new ones. So that was the appeal for Germany for me. It wasn't, I think I was looking more to, I was looking to Asia a lot. I was looking to Japan imaginatively, or like I'd said, I did the J1 in New York. New York for me was a big thing. Like a lot of Irish people, I have a lot of relatives who went to America and had that experience. Europe, not so much for me. I have traveled there, but it hasn't had the same imaginative influence, I suppose.
So this is, I think, in a strange way connected. Catherine again is asking about Vivian's bonkersness. Did you consider diagnosing Vivian's eccentricities? Because you were somebody who was going to study medicine and obviously have an interest in that side of things. Was that part of your thinking?
No, definitely not. And I think that for me was a big surprise when Eggshells got published and I started doing interviews and chatting with readers. And see, to me, Vivian, she just sees the world differently. I don't see her as having a condition or being in any way, having any kind of illness, or I just saw her seeing the world differently. And it was slightly like how I see it, but much more pronounced. And I remember going to various book clubs when Eggshells came out, and some people getting really, almost angry, saying, come on, what does she have? Diagnose her. And they came up with schizophrenia, autism, a range of disorders or conditions that I hadn't even thought about. And I know if I wrote a character who had a condition, I would obviously research it and try and get it right, in as much as you can get it right. But no, I just saw her as slightly eccentric and seeing the world differently. And it really did surprise me how normal most people are, that they saw her as so crazy, because I thought she's just that little bit removed from the rest of us.
That's what I think too, that there's something of that in all of us. She tries to learn small talk like it was a foreign language, and she tries and has these very funny failures, like talking about the weather, and that there's something of that in all of us. And
I would have thought that, but it turns out a lot of people are very normal, and that what they say is what they think. So yeah, that was a learning curve. Yeah.
We have to wrap up now, Caitriona, but thank you so much. The time flew. I really, really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, thanks for having me. It was lovely, and great questions. There's a nice range of them too.
Yeah, thank you everybody for the questions, indeed. So our next edition is on the 2nd of June, and I will be talking to Mark O'Halloran. So hope to see lots of you then. And thanks again, Caitriona.
Great. Thanks, Barry. See you.